It is September. What date is the date?
September the 15th.
September 15th, 2013. My name is David Quick. I'm here with Christina Scheltema and Josh Lewis. We're interviewing Christina about being a gardener for the DC Gardeners Oral History Project, which is a project of the Neighborhood Farm Initiative and the DC Humanities Council. Christina, thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's my pleasure.
Good. Can we start by just having you say your name and your address?
Christina Scheltema, 1401 Newton Street, Northeast, Washington, D.C.
Great. And like I said, this will focus on gardening, but let's start by just hearing a bit about your early life, where you grew up, your family, neighborhood, things like that.
I was born in D.C., but I actually grew up in the country. My parents moved to northern Baltimore County when I was an infant. So we lived in a rented farmhouse on an acre in northern Baltimore County. My dad had a great big vegetable garden in the backyard. He raised bees, he raised goats, chickens, ducks, geese, all sorts of creatures, and then we had a donkey at one point.
Mm-hmm.
So we had all sorts of critters. My mother, he was, God bless him, he was one of these back to the land guys. This is the 1970s. My mother was into pottery. They really liked the peace and quiet of the countryside. So while she was taking pottery classes at Goucher College, she needed a place with a wheel and a kiln. So they took us to this local commune, you're not going to believe this, called Heathcote, where my father taught them organic gardening in exchange for his wife using their potter's wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember as a child running around Heathcote, running around the compound, and my daddy saying, make sure you don't go barefoot because you could get hookworm, because they didn't have indoor plumbing. Mm-hmm. And he was concerned about that sort of thing. But yeah, both of my parents were avid gardeners, so I've been gardening since I was, as long as I can remember, since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. We would start our tomato and broccoli and cabbage seedlings indoors in a little tray in the dormer to the attic. You know how some of the houses around here have the dormers?
Mm-hmm.
So he had a little shelf built up in the attic dormer, and that's where the seeds would get started.
Okay. And so had he grown up on a farm? Was that something he...
No, he grew up in Bethesda.
Okay.
That was just something he always wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. And by that, so you talked about him being back to the part of that back to the land movement. Did he actually go kind of whole hog, like I'm going to actually be a subsistence farmer?
He tried. He was unsuccessful. Wait for the Metro bus to go by.
Okay.
He was very much into solar energy and started building his own solar rooftop collectors in the mid-70s. That was an interesting time because I was hitting adolescence, and really all I cared about was being able to wash my hair. Mm-hmm. And he just wanted to generate hot water from the sun, and you'd have hot water whenever you had it. And God love him.
And was there enough hot water?
No, of course not.
So you talked about growing seedlings up in the attic. Was it just part of... Did you have siblings? Or?
I did. I'm the eldest of four.
Okay.
I'm the eldest of four. Yeah, that was just a family. That was just something that we did.
Yeah. And were you expected to help in the garden?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. Of course, yeah.
We've been hearing different answers to that question, actually, though some people didn't have to do it if they didn't want to, but...
Yeah, we were pretty much expected to help with just about everything, yeah.
Okay. So, growing up out there in the country, were you there through high school?
We moved actually further out in the country when I turned 14. So, the year I started high school, they moved to Pennsylvania. they bought a property on 10 acres in southern York County, Pennsylvania, so they were even further out in the country. And they got sheep. I think they ditched the goats at that point, and geese, and I think they brought up the donkey.
Okay.
But they had an orchard that came with the property. The sheep, I think, conveyed, believe it or not. Sheep convey, and I think 2 dogs and a cat conveyed.
What do you mean conveyed?
Well, you know how you buy a property, and usually the appliances convey.
Oh, I see.
The draperies, the window treatments might convey. Well, in this case, the sheep and the dog and the cat conveyed with the property.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making this up. I wish I were.
Uh-huh.
So they had a larger garden out there,
Okay.
and bees.
And bees. And did he figure out how to be a beekeeper himself?
Well, yeah, he figured out how to be bee. Yeah, he was more successful at keeping bees than at a lot of other things. Yeah, and he had homing pigeons. I forgot about that. He had homing pigeons both in Parkton and in Pennsylvania.
It sounds like you guys grew a lot of your food. I mean, was it almost all of it, or?
We grew a lot. Not all of it, but we grew a lot.
So what type of ways did you go to markets or anything, or did you like barter with your neighbors for other things, or?
Well, we'd go to the grocery store. We bartered. My father was always into bartering, and sometimes he would sell. I think he would sell lamb, and I know he would sell squab from the pigeons.
What's squab?
Squab is a young pigeon.
Okay.
When they eat pigeon, they don't say roast pigeon. They call it squab when they eat it, so that you don't think about the fact that you're eating pigeon.
Yeah. Yeah, these were homing pigeons, by the way. They weren't your city pigeons, and they were trained to home.
So were a lot of the people like that you went to school with, or just that you knew in the community, also back to the landers?
No, we were pretty unusual, and we didn't talk about the back to the land stuff really, because we're kids, and we wanted to be like the other kids, and the other kids weren't doing the back to the land stuff, so we're a little bit different, and kids don't want to be different.
So would you say that like your experience with all that growing food as a kid, when you were a child, it was something you wanted to do, or it was just something you had to do?
It's just something we had to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's just part of. I don't know. It's just part of living. It was part of growing up, as I did. But that said, my grandmother was a great gardener. She gardened in a community garden up in Bethesda. Off Old Georgetown Road. I remember visiting her. My father would take the rototiller down to till her garden every year. She had Washington clay. He was constantly trying to get her to incorporate organic matter, with mixed success, of course.
At getting her to do it, or
getting her to do it. Getting her to do it. Grandma was kind of stubborn. She was. My family's Dutch. My father's family's Dutch.
Okay.
And they're just a little bit stubborn. But she was a trained landscape architect from this school in the Netherlands. So as a woman, she was born in the 1890s. She graduated from this landscape architecture school, and that's where she met my grandfather.
In the Netherlands, though.
In the Netherlands, yeah.
Neat.
Yeah.
So wait, what was the community garden that she was at? Is it still there?
I don't know if it's still there. I don't know if it's been developed. I don't know the name of it.
Okay.
I just remember it as a child.
Okay. Because at that time, I mean, what was...
It may have been a victory garden left over from World War II. I don't know. You know, they'd probably been... She'd probably been gardening there for a while.
Okay. Interesting.
I think Mamie D was a victory garden.
Okay. Do you know? Was Mamie D a victory garden?
I don't know. Benny didn't know. I know of another one, like the Melvin Hazen one.
Yeah.
It was a victory garden.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it might be. But anyway.
Did your dad or mom, did they have paying jobs, careers outside of all this work?
My father did. My mother did not for most of the time that we were growing up.
Mhm.
She taught before she had children, but I think she stopped work when she had me.
What kind of work? What was your dad's career?
He worked for, trying to think. He was a student when I was born. He worked for the shock trauma unit at University Hospital in Baltimore, briefly, when they were just setting that up.
Okay.
He worked for the state of Maryland. For many years, he worked for the state of Maryland as a health physicist. So those are the guys who go around and inspect the x-ray equipment and ensure that you're not getting too much radiation. That was the primary thing that he did. They're both gone now. Yeah, they're both gone.
Did they live out their lives there up in Pennsylvania?
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. My father was there until his last illness in 2007. We had to put him in nursing care. He had Alzheimer's dementia.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in the hospital with a series of infections. So I moved him down here, put him in a nursing home out in rural Prince George's County, which was the best I could do for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was in a nursing home out in the countryside with a herd of deer on the property. Which was, again, about the best you can do if you're going to have to put a family member in a nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
Keep them as close to their surroundings as possible. My mother lived out her days up in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
She died up there. Yeah.
So back to your childhood, did you go to college after finishing high school?
I went to college, went to the State University, a little ways from home, yeah.
So
also
Penn State?
No, Millersville State University. It's
Okay.
one of the state, it's a member of the State College Network up there.
Okay.
It was one of the state normal schools, the state teaching schools,
Mm-hmm.
way back in the day.
Okay. And what did you have in mind to do with your life at that point?
I wasn't quite sure. I studied biology. I thought I wanted to do research when I started.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 6 months in a research lab up at NIH when I was 20 and realized that really wasn't what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
It really wasn't a good fit for me. So I went back to school and took some journalism classes and ended up, after I finished school, I ended up working for an editorial department for an association for a couple of years. And then I went to work for an environmental consulting firm and then the Environmental Protection Agency.
Okay.
I've been there ever since.
Okay. Yeah. And so sounds like where you went to college, you were still kind of out in the country.
Oh, it was way out in the countryside.
Yeah,
It was in Lancaster County. You could tell when the Amish farmers were fertilizing their fields because they used pig manure.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very aromatic.
Mm-hmm.
So, did you try to grow anything when you were in college? I mean,
Just plants in my dorm room.
Yeah.
And I actually worked for one of the botany professors. So I would sometimes help out with the greenhouse.
Okay. And was that something I don't know, did you miss it, or living on a farm?
Well, I didn't miss living on the farm. I enjoyed working in the greenhouse. I did not miss living on the farm. My parents' farm was not a particularly pleasant place to live, especially not in the winter.
Okay.
Bucolic, because it was out in the country, yes, but for a woman, especially for a young girl, it wasn't a particularly nice place to live.
Okay.
Yeah.
So were you thinking that you'd go live in a city at that point?
I wasn't really thinking about it. I pretty much just got out as soon as I could. I didn't drive.
Mm-hmm.
For many years, my dad didn't believe in teaching his kids to drive. So I needed to, when I finished college, I needed to work somewhere that had public transportation, so that pretty much put me in a city environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you come to DC after you graduated?
I came
or?
to DC after I graduated. Yeah,
Okay.
I had family down here, and I think I spent my last summer up in Millersville, and then moved down here around Labor Day, and stayed with an aunt and uncle. Stayed with actually the uncle who I'm looking after now. I stayed with him, and my aunt. My aunt's passed away.
Okay.
He's in his 80s.
What neighborhood did they live?
Kensington. They were up in Kensington, Maryland.
Okay.
And then I found a spot in a group house, and eventually bought in Brookland.
Okay.
So
this is what, late 70s, early 80s, or?
I was in college in early 80s, finished college in mid 80s,
Okay.
and moved down here in 1986.
Okay. And so you were
And
in
I've been here ever since.
Right. So what was that neighborhood where the group house was in?
It was Chevy Chase.
Okay.
Yeah, right on the Maryland DC line.
Right.
You could see the difference in the two jurisdictions whenever it snowed.
Mm-hmm.
One side of the street would be plowed, one side of the street was not. Marion Barry was our mayor for life, and what can I say?
Uh-huh. Yeah, what else do you remember about DC at that? I mean, what was DC like in mid-80s? What
There was a lot of violence. There were a lot of shootings. We used to call it the murder capital of the world. Yeah. That was during the crack years. The crack wars, so you did not go into some parts of the city.
Mm-hmm. And were you excited to be living in the city, or?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun to be young and down here.
Mm-hmm.
So what type of like shops or stores or things, restaurants did you go to in your first couple
Oh
of
my
years out here?
goodness. Everything.
You go to any farmers markets back then at that point?
We did. There weren't so many back then. I'm not sure when they had the DuPont Fresh Farm Market. I'm not sure when that opened. There was one in Adams Morgan that I would go to sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
There were some Magruders. The Magruders up on Upper Connecticut Avenue I would go to a lot.
That's still there, isn't it?
It's still there, yeah.
The Magruders.
Yeah, I would go to Magruders a lot.
Mm-hmm. And so when did you start gardening in the city?
I started gardening on my window ledges. Actually, I always had a lot of plants. I had house plants and bulbs, amaryllis, paper whites, things like that. When I started working for EPA, I had a window by my desk, a bay window. I worked down at Waterside Mall, which is a hideous office building, but it had these bay windows if you were lucky enough to have an office with a window. And so the bay windows would go the entire length of the office. So we had a friendly competition to see who could have more biomass in their office.
Mm-hmm.
It was me and this friend of mine from the office who was from Guyana,
Mm-hmm.
South America. So we had lots and lots and lots of plants. So I had a ton of African violets and spiders, and I'm trying to think what else. Some Swedish ivy. I'm not even sure what all I had in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots and lots of plants.
And did you win?
I think so. I was in my 20s, so it was
Okay.
a little different.
Yeah. And what about food growing though?
Chili peppers and herbs in the window boxes.
Okay.
I tried to grow tomatoes, but it was really too hot.
Okay.
But you could grow chili peppers and herbs very well in the window boxes.
Did you do anything at your house, the house you bought?
Well, this is the house that I bought.
Mm.
I didn't do too much the first couple of years. I was mostly focused on the yard, and I didn't want to dig up the yard and put in vegetables because I have limited sun, and when I moved here there was a tree where the stop sign is now. There's an empty tree box. So I really had a pretty small space for vegetables. So I put in herbs. I have a lot of herbs. I edge my little garden bed over there with herbs, and I have a couple of humongous rosemary plants out there that I'll show you. And I have some fig trees in pots, but I don't really grow vegetables in my yard just because of lack of space.
Okay.
Yeah. Hot pepper plants in pots, but that's about it.
Okay.
Just because hot peppers do really well in pots, and they don't mind the heat, and they don't mind wilting sometimes.
So when did you start doing community garden or some kind of more bigger scale food growing?
It was probably in '96 when Martha was putting up signs looking for people who were interested in a community garden.
Here in Brookland?
Here in Brookland,
Okay.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
this was Martha Sinerkia?
Martha Sinerkia, who grew
Okay.
up in the watermelon house on Otis Street
Uh-huh.
that you probably visited.
Yep. We should go by there. It's really cool.
I don't think I've seen it.
It's an 1890s house.
Okay. So how long had you been in Brookland at that point?
I think a couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah, just a
And
couple of years.
why did you move to Brookland?
I was looking for... I lost a roommate, so I needed to move, and I decided to go solo rather than looking for somebody else to live with and sharing space. So I went through a gradual progression of thinking I would find another apartment, to buying a house, to looking at condos and co-ops, to looking at houses. Deep down, I really needed a house with a yard and a space that I could garden, but it took me a while to get there. I went for a vacation in Vermont, went on a bike tour for a couple of weeks, and came back and realized that I really, really needed a house with a yard with green space. So I started looking for that, and I found this house kind of by accident. Just picked up one of those little real estate magazines, and I didn't really know the neighborhood. Knew it through, I think I'd been out here on a date, and I'd been out here for a church retreat, but that was about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope Rocky's is not
He's fine.
okay.
So you said you saw advertisements for people that wanted a community garden. Was it
Yeah.
specifically Mamie D. Lee or what?
No, this was when we were founding the old Brookland Community Garden.
Okay.
Martha had put up signs on utility poles, and one of the neighbors actually saw it and showed it to me. We were having a block meeting. So she saw it, she gave me the number, she pulled off the little number, and she said, oh, you might be interested in this. So I called Martha. Martha at the time was living further down Newton Street in the house next to the CVS, the house with a porch next to the empty lot next to the CVS, with the statue of St. Francis in the front yard coming out of the ground. And so she was organizing this garden and working with Judy Tiger to get the property over by Catholic U.
So she had a location in mind.
Yeah, she had a
already.
location. Yeah, they'd already, and I think they had talked to Judy about it. I don't remember if they worked it out the first year or if it took 2 years to get the property, the lease with Catholic secured. I can't quite recall at this point.
Okay.
But we were able to get that secured in I think it was right around Memorial Day, '96. So we started digging it up, and Martha, God bless her, decided that we would cut the sod and we would till it all ourselves. I don't know if you gentlemen have ever handled a sod cutter.
Because it was all just grass.
It was grass on a site on a former residential site. So there was a lot of construction debris on the site. They torn down. It was basically a block of houses that they tore down, and then one house kind of up on the corner that they were using for faculty offices, I think. So it was with grass growing over it.
Yeah.
So she got a sod cutter, we measured off the plots, and we were out there with this big, humongous piece of equipment trying to cut the sod. It basically peels the sod off, hitting rocks and all sorts of stuff. Going through that, rolling up the sod, myself and Martha and Laura and Bertha Nowden. I think it was almost all women.
How many people were there at the beginning?
I don't know, maybe half a dozen.
Okay.
And then we started, I think she recruited John Feely and Phil Wright to try to pull rocks out.
Mm-hmm.
So they were out there with picks trying to pull out rocks, and I brought a friend. Wow, he's just looks at this and he says, "You don't need a tractor."
Mm-hmm.
So it's just about impossible to get a tractor in the city. What do you know? Has to go by. So we looked at tractors, and I told Martha that I had seen a tractor back behind the monastery, back behind the Howard Divinity School,
Mm-hmm.
because I walked the dogs everywhere. I walked my dog all over the neighborhood, so I'd be taking the dog on green spaces and maybe trespassing a little bit with the dog.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd seen a tractor. So I said, well, I've seen a tractor here. Maybe you can find out if we can use their tractor. Well, that didn't pan out. So, to make a long story short, we got a guy with a backhoe
Mm-hmm.
who was a contractor for Catholic. I think I called Catholic and asked if they had anybody, if any of their landscape crew could help us out. And they didn't, but they recommended a contractor who was working for them who had a backhoe up on the property, up on campus rather. So he came over and he dug out our garden plots, and he dug out a mountain of rubble. Oh my goodness, probably 10 feet by 12 feet. I mean, a huge mountain of rubble. We're finding sewer pipes. We're finding house foundations. All
Wow.
sorts of stuff. Yeah. Well, let me tell you, when you got a couple of gals who are determined to have their garden, they're going to have their garden.
Uh-huh.
So if we have to dig out house foundations, we're going to dig out house foundations.
Uh-huh.
So we finally got the land prepped enough that we could garden, I think around 4th of July weekend. So I put in my garden the 3rd of July, 1996.
Okay.
And had people water in it. I put in eggplants and tomatoes and peppers.
Mm-hmm.
How many plots were there approximately?
We started, I'd have to go pull out the map.
I mean, was there 20 or 50? Or?
No, we started with about a dozen.
Okay. So did some people have more than one plot, or was there one
I had
plot
a double plot. I had a double plot, but a double plot was about the size of a regular plot in Mamie D.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I can pull out the map and the plot if you're
Okay.
interested in it.
Sure.
It would take
Yeah.
me a minute.
We can look at that later.
Okay.
So at that time when Catholic leased that land to you all, how much did they charge? You remember? Was it nominal or was it?
Well, this is the best part. They charged us $1
Uh-huh.
per year to lease the land, and then they waived the fee.
And do you remember
Yeah.
what was their motivation in doing that at that time?
I think Martha and Judy Tiger sweet-talked them. I think they wanted to build community relations. And they had vacant land that they weren't using.
Okay.
But I think Martha and Judy probably sweet-talked them. And let me tell you, Martha Sonokia could be pretty convincing when she wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
Richard and Tony could probably tell you about that.
Yeah.
And her husband could probably tell you that. So that's kind of that's how that worked out.
Okay. And Judy worked with, what was the name of the organization that she?
With GROW,
Okay.
Garden Resources in Washington.
Does that still exist?
I think they're defunct now.
Okay. But their mission was to do stuff like that, to train.
Their mission was to work with people to establish and develop and continue community gardens in the city.
Okay.
So they were sort of the point source for they were the main organization that worked with community gardens
Okay.
back in the day.
And was that a hard fought kind of thing to do at that time, to set up a community garden?
It took a lot of energy. You know, we looked at, after we lost the property, we looked at other sites, and we tried to take our remaining group and start again, but we just couldn't gain enough momentum.
Okay.
There were a few people who were interested. It's myself, Lori Knapp, I think Susan, Pamela, Mike Turner, Casey Warner, who's since moved out to Colorado.
So how long was that garden around?
96 to 2006, I think.
Okay.
Can you tell us
96 or 2000.
why you lost the property?
Catholic was talking to developers. Catholic U was talking to developers, and they were looking at signing an agreement with a developer at any point. Then, this was just before the economy tanked, so they told us that they could not renew our lease.
Okay.
And what's there now in that space?
Right now, it's still that space is still empty. That is the one space that is not yet being developed. The dorm across the street's been knocked down. The field across the street has been developed into Brookland markets. Right now, it's a parking lot, and they have a shell for some sort of a house.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's like a demonstration thing. So it's a parking lot. It's a Bozzuto sales tractor.
Right. Because there's just lots of really new development all around there right now. I mean.
Yeah. Well, it's construction. You know.
Yeah.
It's all under construction, and they've closed off that end of Monroe Street. So they just did that within the last couple of weeks. The traffic is just hideous right now.
Yeah. What else, so from your time at that community garden, though, I mean, you mentioned some names. Are there other people that stand out in your memory who gardened there?
We had Garlinda McDaniels and Chris. What was Chris's last name? I can't remember Chris's last name. Laura. Susan Yoder, Pamela Copeland. Pamela and Susan and I all migrated up to Fort Collin, up to Mamie D. Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Pamela was the first one to find out about it, and she told us.
Mm-hmm.
So we all moved up there. Lori Knapp.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Lori and I gardened there for a couple of years. She was there the last few years.
Yeah.
And Casey, I think, was there with us. Mike Turner.
And
Bertha Nowden, who's now deceased.
Mm-hmm. And what was the relationship of the garden? Did the people who lived around there embrace having a community garden nearby?
You know, they didn't seem to mind. We actually got water from one of the houses. The house that was closest to us, that was adjacent to the garden lot, there was a house on Lawrence Street. When we first moved there, it was owned by a couple, and then they sold it to the Capuchin Order of Friars. It's a bunch of Franciscan friars. We used to call them the Cappuccino Brothers,
Mm-hmm.
the Capuchins. So we got water from them for a couple of years, and then they sold it to Soraya Ahmed, who had the coffee house down at 12th and Otis for some years. So we had a very good relationship with Soraya. We basically used her water coming from her house. So we would pay her for water, and we would bring her vegetables and strawberries. And I remember passing strawberries over the fence to her and her family. Because she would. I had an excess of strawberries, so I'd pick some strawberries and I'd say, "So, would you like some strawberries?" We'd holler over the fence at each other and asked her if she wanted some strawberries. So she did, and so they brought over. They just passed her over a container, and I filled it with strawberries and passed it back.
Nice.
Yeah. We did the same with tomatoes and whatever.
How was that garden set up? I mean, was there a board, or was there a president of the garden?
We had a coordinator, and we had an executive committee, I guess, for lack of a better description. So we had an executive committee. Martha was the first garden coordinator, and then I did it for a while, and then Susan Yoder took it over, and then Lori Knapp did after that.
What kind of stuff did you have to like implement rules, or like what kind of stuff did you have to deal with in that position?
It was mostly working out the logistics with the keys and the garden agreements. Our rules were initially kind of loosey-goosey. We had a bit of conflict a couple of years in over the rules and over what could get dug up and what couldn't, and how we should expand and where we should put plots and things like that. And we actually had a woman who was a neighbor who was a gardener there who broke some new ground, and without getting permission of anybody, without talking to anybody or getting anybody's permission to do that. And so we had a lot of conflict about that. We had some issues with overgrown and neglected and abandoned plots. We had one gardener who was an architect who was really needed a lot of structure, who was having fits with the whole thing. So we had an interesting time with that, and we did have a bit of conflict.
Yeah. Was it a stressful place to be, or was it
well, it depended upon who was there.
Yeah.
It depended upon who was there. We had one gardener, the lady who broke the ground and stuff, who ended up leaving, which was probably just as well. It turned out she actually lived in the house across the street, and we had a lot of problems with her in the neighborhood in subsequent years, which I didn't see coming. I just saw her planting a lot of stuff in the yard, and I said, "Oh, well, you should come garden with us." Had no idea.
All right.
So anyway.
But when you started gardening there, that was kind of your first. Since you went for college, was that the first time that you were actually?
And that was the first time I actually
actively?
had grow. Yeah, that was the first time other than hot peppers and herbs on my window boxes. Yeah, that was the first time I was actively growing.
Did it all come back to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't even have to think about it. Yeah. It took a while to figure out starting seeds, because I had tried that in the apartment and tried that here, and I was never able to duplicate my daddy's window dormer environment, so I eventually ended up using heat mats and grow lamps to germinate seeds. It took a few years to get that down.
Yeah. But that was a priority for you, was to start your own seeds?
Yeah, it was a priority just because you could get better varieties that way.
And were you growing heirlooms and things like that?
I was growing, I don't even know, half a dozen different varieties of tomatoes and peppers,
Mm-hmm.
and a few different kinds of eggplants.
Mm-hmm.
So some were heirlooms, some were just interesting varieties. I grow yellow pear tomatoes, which are delicious. I have a few out here. I like to experiment with different things, so I experiment with different varieties.
Yeah.
And you can't get those varieties. You usually can't get seedlings in those varieties.
Yeah. So as someone who grew up gardening, did you find yourself as a teacher or a leader at the community garden?
I did, yeah, I did. And it was kind of funny because there were some days when I couldn't get anything done in my plot because I was answering questions from novice gardeners, which I actually don't mind doing, but it's a matter of time. And these days I actually do a little bit of garden coaching. So I've been doing that for the last couple of years.
Okay.
Was there very much turnover at the first community garden, or?
There were some people who came in and didn't know what they were getting into, and didn't know how much work it would be. And I think you get that anywhere because it's hard work. Working the soil is hard work, and people don't know how hard that is.
Yeah.
And they don't know how much time it can take.
What was the demographic like? Was it like younger people or families, or just
it
singles,
was mostly younger people. The age range varied. I was in my 30s when we started. We had a lady who I think was in her 60s or 70s. That was Bertha Nowden. Susan, I think, was in her 50s. I think Lori was in her late 30s or 40s. Martha was in her 20s. I'm not sure about Chris and Garlinda. And then we had a family. We had the Marquez family from Mary House. They were Mary House residents who had a plot, but it turned out they were more interested in harvesting than in actually growing. It turned out, we found out a couple of years later, we had some problems with theft in the garden, and they had stopped having a plot, but they were coming through a hole in the fence and harvesting. So that was a little bit of a problem, yeah. We had this one lady who used to garden with her friends and folks from her mosque, Rakaya, who lived on North Capitol Street. She came to us through Gardening Resources Washington. She used to be with another community garden that was developed, Gethsemane, I think is what they used to call it, on Euclid Street. And they developed the property that was over in Columbia Heights area, and it became a very hot real estate market. So the property owners kicked out the garden, developed the property, and she came on over to our garden, and God bless her, she moved her soil. She brought 2 truckloads, 2 or 3 truckloads, pickup truckloads of soil from her old garden plot, because she had been working on her soil for a while, and she liked her soil, and we were on a site that had construction. So she was moved. She said she'd worked on her soil for 2 or 3 years, and she was going to bring her soil with her. And was that okay with us? I said, that's fine. We don't care. come on over, bring your soil, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So she brought her soil.
So was it that good? I mean,
It was good. It was black. It was nice looking soil.
That's funny. What did the rest of you amend the soil with?
Horse manure and leaf compost from the city.
Okay.
And
Manure from the stables over in
Yep.
Rock Creek? Yeah.
Yep. My brother brought a couple of pickup trucks over for my garden plot. And for Martha, I think, the first couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah. And compost. We did a little bit of composting with mixed success. Got to turn the compost, you know.
Yeah.
Did everyone bring their own tools, or was there like a tool shed or something?
We have a tool shed. We have a tool. It wasn't exactly a shed. We had a tool box that one of our gardeners built for us, and we had that for a while, and then eventually that fell apart from weather and wear and tear. So I think somebody gave us another. I think it was like a garden bench or something. So we had tools. I think we got tools through a grant through Grow, and I'm trying to remember. They were stolen the first year. The sod cutter that we used was stolen, and the tools were stolen when we first set up. So Grow had insurance. It replaced the sod cutter. It was a borrowed sod cutter from the Park Service. Cost about $5,000 or $6,000 to replace. So Grow's insurance paid for all of that, bought us some tools. We had a pretty high garden fee from that point on because we had to pay insurance through Grow. Grow provide garden insurance in addition to working with Catholic, and Catholic required that we have insurance. So our plot fees were a little bit more than most places.
Like how much?
I think it started out at 35 or 40, and it was up to about 45 or 50 per plot. Yeah,
that's a little more than.
Yeah, it's a little more than you would than your typical garden. Yeah. This is just from memory too. I have to go look and grab my notebook to tell you.
Yeah. So the garden came to an end. It was no more.
It came to an end. Yeah. I think that the tools went to. I think that the tools went to NFI.
Well, NFI didn't exist then.
Well, the tools went to B. This was about 2008, 2009.
Yeah, I guess that. Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, the tools and the hose. We had a really primitive irrigation system set up that consisted of 100-foot lengths of hose strung along the chain link fence. And just, branch area, like 3 or 4 prong, connectors at various points along the route. That we got from some garden catalog. And hoses running along the fence. So the hoses running along the fence, I think, went to NFI, and I think a lot of them ended up down at Fort DuPont.
Okay.
Did the lady take her dirt to another community?
No, I'm not sure what happened. She left her dirt.
Oh.
She disappeared. I don't know what happened to her. Her plot became overgrown. All of the plots are overgrown. I think I went back later to get my plants at the same time that B got the tools. B Trickett got the tools and the hoses. She basically took anything that she could use for NFI.
Yeah.
And that was back when NFI was just getting started.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So then you found out about Mamie D garden up in Fort Todd.
Found out about Mamie D. I had a year when I did not belong to a community garden, but that was the year that my father was really ill, So I was gardening in Rosie and Donald's backyard. They were out west for the better part of the summer and had raised garden beds that they weren't doing anything with. So they asked me if I would like to garden, and I said absolutely. And they actually wanted to come home and have tomatoes and peppers, so I planted up their garden, and I put in some fancy peppers, put in some paprikas and some Corona de Toros, which they liked. They are, I tease them about being mostly boring bell pepper people, but I didn't have any bell peppers planted, but I put in tomatoes and some peppers, and I can't remember what else, but that was the year that my dad was really sick and was in and out of the hospital a lot, and had to move him down to a nursing home, so that was actually perfect for me that year.
So was there a wait to get on Mamie D Lee, or did you?
Not at that time. Not at that time. I found out about it sometime in the spring. I think they'd already had their first meeting and sign-up period. Howard was the garden manager at the time. So Pamela Copeland found out about it, got a plot, and then she sent us the information. So I contacted Howard, and he had a plot. He assigned me to a plot, and that was helped me mark it off, and that was pretty much it. And he helped me test the soil too. The soil was depleted of nitrogen and phosphorus, completely depleted of those two nutrients. I think the previous tenant must have been into Miracle-Gro. I didn't do anything to amend the soil over the years, so I probably put a ton of soil amendments down the first year. The first year I was digging out Bermuda grass, digging it up, and putting in organic matter, putting in manure, putting in coffee grounds and eggshells and stuff as I had them, putting in urea, putting in triple superphosphate, which I don't like to use, but I had to use because it was that depleted, putting in bone meal. I think I added everything I could find to add. Kelp meal, which is a really good organic amendment. But yeah, I basically renovated the soil for that garden plot.
So you retested it and
yeah, I don't know if I've retested it, but it's been put down a bunch of lime. It's been pretty good. I need to retest it. It's been a couple of years.
How long were you adding all those?
I did a lot the first year and then a little bit more the second year. And I still add when I plant, but I don't think I added as much this past year as I was planting.
Were you growing that first year while you were?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was growing tomatoes, I was growing eggplants, artichokes, trying to grow artichokes.
Successfully?
Mixed. It was, it's hard to grow artichokes in this climate. It really is.
Yeah. So who was Mamie D Lee? I mean, Josh asked if there was a waiting list. It's pretty full garden now. Was it then?
It was not pretty full then. That was before NFI. And then the second year I was there, NFI came. They took that whole end row, or double row, whole end row of plots, and really, have helped to revitalize the garden, because they brought in a lot of people through their program who've gone through their training program and have moved on to rent plots in the Mamie D Lee community garden, which has been wonderful because it's really been revitalizing the garden. We had a lot of old-time gardeners who were there. I used to have a neighbor who had 2 plots who hardly grew a thing. And that was for probably 3 or 4 years. And then I think last winter, he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So he was adjacent to my plot and then adjacent to the other plot, sort of kitty corner to mine.
Mm-hmm. So was it pretty, I don't know, loose structurally?
No, not under Howard. Not under Howard. He would not. No. There were some people who pushed the boundaries, and there were some. I know. What was his name? Brooke was really gung ho at amending his plot. His plot is now Bob Lowry's plot.
Mm-hmm.
So Brooke brought in all sorts of organic matter, and the end result was that he raised up his plot so that the level was much higher than his neighbors, and his neighbors who had not been getting flooded before were getting flooded, and there were complaints, and there was, I remember there were some disputes about that.
Mm-hmm.
I was not involved in that, but I remember hearing about it. But Howard, who was the garden manager, who was a big tall guy, wasn't going to put up with any nonsense. Pretty much didn't put up with anything. And they were very careful to post after that point, to start posting the rules and making sure everybody had a copy of the rules and the bylaws and things like that.
Is Howard still there?
Howard's not still there. He's moved on. He's moved, he and his wife moved to the Midwest somewhere.
Okay.
You've always been in the same plot, though, right?
I've always been in the same plot, yeah. Yeah, I've been in the same plot since I've been there.
It's interesting, though, because, like, Bob's plot is, like, particularly flat right now, so...
That's pretty funny. Yeah, it wasn't back in the day. It stuff settles down and is incorporated, and as you grow more vegetables on the site, then the organic matter becomes incorporated in that, so you don't have the same sort. You have your biomass that's being circulated, and you tend to lose biomass, but over time. But yeah, Brooke added an incredible amount. He added probably 3-4 times as much as I added over time in 1 year.
What was he bringing? Where was it coming from? What was
it was, at first it was leaf compost, then it was coffee grounds. He had an arrangement with a Caribou Coffee by his workplace.
For one plot.
For one plot, yeah. He was bringing in coffee grounds, so his entire plot smelled like coffee.
Mm-hmm.
It was the funniest thing. He'd bring in coffee grounds. You'd see the empty the coffee filters. He'd push off to the side. I was getting coffee grounds from Starbucks, which is what gave him the idea. Starbucks has a program called Grounds for Gardeners. So you can get their spent coffee grounds for your garden plot, for your garden. So where I worked, there was a Starbucks across the street, and there were a lot of people who we basically signed up and took turns picking up the coffee grounds. So you get like a day, maybe once every 2 weeks or once a week, and you get your grounds. That would be your day to get your grounds. So we kind of spread it out. So I was bringing bags of coffee grounds up to my plot, and that's how Brooke got the idea. So he kind of cornered the market on this Caribou Coffee by his office and was storing coffee grounds somewhere at work and then bringing them all in his car on weekends. I'm not sure how he was doing this, but his plot literally smelled like coffee. It's pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
So you, like, from the description, it sounds like your plot's closer to the walkway.
It's closer to the walkway.
So how has it been before and after the fence? Is there any difference, or?
Oh yeah, we don't have the deer damage. It used to be that you could not grow Swiss chard at all. because the deer would come in and have it for dinner or dessert. They loved sweet potato tips, and they loved tips of tomatoes. We had an awful lot of deer damage. It made gardening challenging.
Mm-hmm.
You also had midnight shoppers who would come in off the footpath and would come along and pick and help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are different strategies for dealing with that. Mine was to pack heat.
Say it.
By which I mean that I would plant hot peppers along the pathway. So I would always put hot peppers adjacent to the pathway. And I usually plant a variety that was really attractive, but very hot. So if they helped themselves to my garden plot, they would get a little bit more than they bargained for.
Mm-hmm. And do you think it worked?
I think it worked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it worked. I wish it worked as well with the deer. Yeah. I joke. Yeah, this gardener packs heat. Don't mess with the lady's garden. You'll get something that you're not expecting.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you've been there, what, 8 years at Mamie D, or 7 years? You said 2006?
No. 2008 was when
okay.
I started. So
5 or 6 years.
This would be my 5th year then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
this would be my 5th
I
year.
mean, it sounds like you said you've seen, like, a lot of improvements, you know, like that maybe resulted from NFI and things like that.
A lot of improvements from NFI. The deer fence, I think, has helped. It's certainly made the place more secure. Under B's leadership, we've seen a lot of improvements too. You know, we have our waiting list. We have, things. It's just we have new equipment that we didn't have before.
Mm-hmm.
I think for years we used Benny's tiller, and that was pretty much it.
Oh, so they used to actually, the tiller at the garden actually used to be his tiller?
Yeah, there was one. Yeah, yeah,
That makes a lot of sense.
yeah, yeah. It was. You would use Benny's tiller.
Got you.
If you, yeah, I mean, you either had your own tiller, or you used Benny, or you'd rent a tiller. Or if you wanted to use a tiller at the garden, you could use, you might be able to sweet talk Benny into letting him letting you use his tiller, or getting him to help till.
So,
Yeah, Benny was a prior garden manager,
And long time.
long time gardener
Yeah.
up there. Yeah, long time gardener up there.
So, I mean, you have experience managing a community garden. I mean, is there any type of improvements or changes or recommendations that you think might be good at Mamie D. Lee? Or?
Very, very minor ones with maintenance. I think it's my main issue right now is water line maintenance, because I'm next to a leaky water line.
So
So you get flooded.
I get a little bit of flooded, yeah. Right now I can't turn off the hose spigot. It just won't go off.
Yeah.
There's always Neil has taken on the compost, which is really, really good. So that's just amazing what he's done with that, just in maybe 6 weeks. So that's made a huge improvement. The fence and the padlocks are good and bad, because sometimes gardeners get locked out and don't necessarily know what the combination is. I remember one year they had changed the combination, and they put up the fence, and for a while we didn't have locks, and then we got locks, and I did not know that we were getting locks, and I didn't know what the combination was, so I was locked out effectively. And I know other gardeners have gotten locked out. So sometimes that can be a barrier to people. And it can be just enough that people don't want to bother. I like the idea of the row captains. I think that's really good. I wish we could do a little bit more with the container gardens in the front. I'm not sure who maintains those. And unfortunately, I haven't had time to do anything. I've thought about asking B about the one that's closest to me. And I think I tucked in a couple of lavender plants, but I haven't had a chance to really do much with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, but I'd say, by and large, it's very well run. It's very difficult to run a community garden, and a garden as large as Mamie D. Oh my goodness, that's a lot. That's a lot of work.
Have you been to many of the other community gardens around the area?
I walk through them when I see them. I remember walking through the one on Tilden, I think.
Yeah, that's the Melvin Hazen.
That's Melvin Hazen. I've driven by a couple. There's a new one. There's one on Capitol Hill on C Street that I drive by all the time. There's that one on Maryland Avenue right in the shadow of the Air and Space Museum. I don't know who gardens there. There's a new one. There are two new ones. There's one off 4th Street that I'm just fascinated by. I have no idea who's gardening over there.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's one in a traffic triangle just on the other side of the Washington Hospital Center. And they have a beehive. They have bees. I think they get their water from the fire hydrant. And they've somehow worked out an arrangement with the city. More power to them.
Sometimes they do.
They also have like a big container there too.
They have a big cistern, yeah.
Yeah.
Looks like maybe almost just catching rainwater and hoses and stuff.
Yeah, they might be doing that too.
They have there too.
Yeah, it's the Wangari Garden. That's what it's called.
It's called the what?
The Wangari Garden, after Wangari Maathai. Was a Kenyan environmentalist.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And yeah, Josh Singer from Casey Trees set it up. So it's
okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So what advice do you have for the new gardeners and people that everyone wants to go do community gardening, but most people don't know what they're getting into? What advice do you have?
Start small. Start small. Find a mentor. Work with someone. Actually, one thought comes to mind, and that is that it might be good to pair up brand new gardeners with people who are more experienced but who can use some help. So if you have a younger person who has a lot of energy.
Sounds like exploitation.
Now. There's so much to be learned. So much to be learned. I actually had a young woman who was helping me one year down at the Brookland Garden. I had foot surgery that year, and she needed some gardening experience to join the Peace Corps. So she helped me out for a few months, which is perfect because I could not dig. My digging foot had surgery, and I could not dig.
Did you have any other answers to that question? Advice?
What was I going to say? Start small. Find a mentor.
Yeah.
Test your soil.
Yeah. Earlier though, you did talk about the recent change at Mamie D that kind of happened in the wake of NFI and the good things that have come for that. But did you see that was that stressful for some of the old timers, that transition?
I think it may have been. Yeah, I think it may have been. I know for some people who've been there for a long time, they've had their farms staked out. We've had Benny and Mary had their farm, Benny, Mary, and Maurice had their little farm up in the corner. Mr. Licorice has his farm in his corner. So we have people with... Mr. Monroe had his double plot that he never gardened. But that was his farm. That was his real estate. And we're talking about people who farmed this land for 10, 20 years or more.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden these newcomers are coming in and saying, these kids are coming in and saying, hey, you got to give up your farm. And they're looking at him like, I don't think so. So I imagine that there's probably a little bit of stress associated with, because
Yeah.
I know they were trying to get people to downsize.
Had that already happened by the time you got there?
No.
Okay.
No, that was before I got. That was that happened after I got there.
Okay. How did that happen? I mean, how did that negotiation or lack of negotiation?
I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. I wasn't involved with that.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't really affect me, but I remember hearing about it, and I remember thinking, oh boy, that's going to be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the thing is that if you work the land for a while, it's kind of like the old-time homesteaders. That land becomes your land,
Mm-hmm.
and you've staked your claim. You've put your blood, sweat, and tears into that parcel of land, and it's yours, and you don't want to give it up.
Yeah.
So I can completely understand that, and I'm very sympathetic.
It sounded like they had like a more of a, when I talked to Benny, like a holistic approach, like in terms of like they all took on more sometimes just to keep everything growing, to not to run into other problems from whoever would. I know he said they wanted to make that a parking lot at one point, and
Yeah.
like
Oh,
that.
I'm sure. And we actually did that up at Brookland too, because for a while, if we didn't have enough gardeners, we would say, oh, well, I'll take a double plot.
Yeah.
Or I'll take a plot and a half. If we didn't have enough gardeners or enough income to pay the insurance, people would take on a little bit more, just so that it would be gardened, or so that we would have the money in the treasury to pay the insurance bill.
Yeah. So what next? Are you going to continue to grow
I'm
out
going to
there?
continue to grow up there as long as I can, as long as I'm able.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that I continue to have the time
Mm-hmm.
with my, caring for my uncle and trying to take care of my house and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was not doing a terribly good job. And my dogs.
And your dogs.
And my dog, who's wanting attention right now.
And has that, having grown up doing this activity in a much more kind of whole life way, have you found your way to meet that need here in an urban environment?
I have, yeah.
Mhm.
I have.
Yeah.
And being participating in a community garden is certainly part of that.
Okay.
Yeah, living in a part of town that has more green space is part of that.
I have one more question.
Sure.
So like in different gardens that I've talked to, some places, some of the gardeners have really been close, and some of them have really been, isolated themselves almost in their plot. Where would you say that? The first community garden ranged in there, and maybe compare that to what it's like at Mamie D. Lee.
Mamie D. Lee is much larger. Much larger than Brookland. Probably 4 to 5 times the size. I'm not sure how many gardeners we have all told.
A lot, yeah.
But I don't think we ever had more than... I'm going to pause for the Metro bus to go by. 15 gardeners at any given time up at Brookland Community Garden. Some people were friendly, some were not. Some people were more sociable, some were not.
Yeah. Did you ever try to have events with everyone, or maybe like a potluck or anything like that? Ever?
We did work days. We never really had potlucks, although the potluck probably would have brought people together. I think when we had meetings at the beginning of the year, like planning meetings, we'd have them over at somebody's house initially, and that would bring people together, and we'd have food at those. But mostly that came in the way of work days. We'd invite the kids. One thing that we did that was fun, although we had a little, one thing that we did that was fun was that we grew pumpkins. We had an area of the garden that was set up to be initially designated as a Three Sisters garden. So we grew pumpkins. I grew pumpkins and pole beans there. The pumpkin seeds I think we got were just, I don't know, somebody scrounged seeds. So they weren't even pumpkins. They were just seeds that somebody had saved. So what we ended up with was something that was a cross between a pumpkin and a zucchini. But we grew them, and they were fun, and the kids had fun, and we had a pole bean teepee, and they had a blast. And we had a big pumpkin harvest one time in the fall when they were ready for harvest. So that was a fun thing to do. And then the next year they said, "Oh well, we must have the pumpkin patch." So we continued to grow pumpkins.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a fun thing to do. But that required people to. That was another thing to be maintained, and then there was always the question of whose it was and who had ownership of it, and how that was going to work.
Yeah.
And that became a little bit of an issue at one point.
Okay.
So have you found a sense of friendship or bonding or community, like closeness with the other gardeners in Mamie D League?
A few, yeah. I haven't been up there as much, but yeah, I have. I don't know a lot of the new people, mostly because I haven't been up there as much as I need to be. But yeah, I have, and certainly with the folks who I've gardened with over the years from Brookland, I have. Yeah, Pamela and I share elder care stories and so forth. So yeah, Mr. Licorice and I are friends. So I have a few. Like I said, I'm not up there as much as I need to be. Probably picking up sounds from Rocky scratching.
That's okay.
Rocky's the dog.
Rocky's the dog. All right, we're about an hour and a quarter. Is there anything we missed? What else would you say about this whole thing?
Well,
any other people that stand out in your memory from over the years?
I'd have to go look back at the book. Yeah, but it's a nice, it's a nice way to meet people and to spend time outdoors and grow delicious food.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And we didn't ask you about what food, how you like to eat. What kind of cooking do you do?
Everything. I'm very partial to grilled eggplant. I really like.
Do you marinate it first, or what?
Just brush a little olive oil on it and stick it on the grill.
Okay.
Slice it in wedges, cut it lengthwise, and pop it on the grill. It's absolutely delicious. Yeah, I like to make a good tomato sauce once a year. I like to grill peppers under the broiler. If you have red peppers, you can put them under the broiler, skin side up, and then peel that off. So you've got your roasted red peppers. I used to make ratatouille from garden vegetables in the microwave. you do. There's a lot of stuff you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I cook. I've been cooking since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. So
Okay.
do a lot of stuff with that.
Okay.
And then you can also, and then the other part of the fun is giving away food to your friends and your neighbors. So my neighbors down the block from me asked one year, Jeannie is very funny. She hollers out to me one day. She says, "Everything okay? You haven't brought us any tomatoes yet." I said, "Well, Jeannie, actually, I've been really sick this year. That's why you haven't seen any tomatoes. That was last year." "Everything okay?" It's either the year I was really sick or the year that my mother died. So, well, not exactly, but I won't forget you.
Yeah, so she noticed.
Yes, I had to bring the Guns tomatoes.
Josh, do you have any other questions?
No, I think we covered most of the stuff pretty well.
Well, thanks, Christina. We
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
You're very welcome. Yeah.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome.